Okay. For people joining the live stream, this is one of an infinite series of internal meetings to do with language, completeness, and consistency. And we've got a variety of topics for today, so let's start with the first one. $script file name.
Right. So there was some meeting, CSE meeting that uses some calendar snafu. I missed. And so I got the notes from it and also had a chat with Garrett, and it wasn't entirely clear to me what was decided. So I'm here taking my interpretation of what this should be and getting clarification on that.
Okay, well, what do we think this is?
Okay, so right, so you came up with this name $evaluation source file, which sounds like a reasonable thing.
Okay. And we already have $evaluation cloud object. When the thing is,
do we? It's not a documented symbol, and I don't see it in the system context. So
okay, I mean, what it would mean if it existed.
Oh,
well, it says it exists.
Huh? Why did it not exist in my build? You need to be logged into the cloud for it to exist, maybe. Huh? Okay. I don't know why.
That is the most ugly example. What on earth is that? That's ridiculously ugly. Sushma, can you try to get that example fixed?
Yeah, I will get that fixed.
Why is it saying read list?
That's the code in the cloud deploy.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
But why does one want to do that? I mean, why is it saying read list that? The heck has read list got to do with it?
Well, I presume that it's showing that you can use it as if it were any other kind of file or similar object, right? So you're going to get the list of bytes that are the code of the API function. Or
I see.
Because it's read list, not binary read list.
But that's a very weird object. I mean,
yeah, I'm not saying that it's an easy to understand example. I
think it's a crazy example. Did anybody know where this example came from? Okay, Sushma, can you try to get this example fixed? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Ty, do you agree that this is a reasonable construct, this evaluation cloud object thing? Although it should presumably refer to this $evaluation source file, which is exactly, and script file name is not a thing. It's just evaluation source file and evaluation cloud object, correct?
Right. Well, so yeah. So while neither $evaluation source file nor $script file name are things, that was a proposal. That the $script file name was the working name.
Okay, which we are proposing to change to $evaluation source file.
Right.
Yes.
But I think there's also the argument that kind of exists already as $input file name.
Except right.
No,
well, right, and I claim it does not. And in particular, I mean, I think the first bullet point is a big difference between.
It has one value during evaluation.
Yes.
What is input file name? What does input file name have when?
Input file name is the name of the file currently being getted by get. So if you have a get,
yes,
then then inside the file you are getting, it'll be the value of that. It will be that file name, and then if you then get another file inside of that, it will change to that file name.
Okay, so what is evaluation source file?
It is the name of the file where the evaluation originated. So if you have a...
Yeah, I understand. That makes perfect sense.
So in a front end, is that always going to be the same as evaluation notebook?
Probably.
I think so, yeah. What is it for a cloud deployed thing?
Right. So I guess the question is, what do we mean by a cloud? Well, I guess a cloud deployed thing. There, I'm not sure. So if you have a Wolfram script and you're evaluating it with -cloud, then
It's obvious.
Then
Right,
it's
obvious.
it's still where you right. It's the name of the script on your local computer that you typed in.
Right.
Now, if you have,
I mean, for example, if you do a cloud evaluate, what is it?
right,
And
well,
if I say, this is going to say nothing, I assume.
probably.
Yeah, it just has a null string there.
Right.
Okay, so cloud evaluate of $evaluation source file.
Well, I guess. Well, I guess the question is, I mean, that evaluation. I mean, assuming that was a saved notebook and not an unsaved.
Yeah, right. It probably wants to be the evaluation notebook.
Right.
Of that, which I don't even think that the cloud knows right now.
Exactly. Oh,
so that would have to be metadata that was passed through, just like a user agent string is passed through.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Garrett? Do you understand what I'm saying here?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, it's a fair amount of trouble to do that for something whose functionality is not obvious to me.
Right.
But I think that's the correct thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's going to require a change to the implementation of Cloud Evaluate.
I mean, I think it's going to require a change to a bunch of stuff. You know, if you want to have the first one pass through, no matter what path it's taking, you know, from a notebook to the cloud to, you know, some gets to.
Well, there may be some mechanism with persistent value that would allow this to work easily.
Yeah, maybe.
Right. So I think, yeah, I'm not sure what happens with a cloud evaluate, but I think the set of changes on desktop is pretty small. Basically, kernel-script needs to learn about this. Wolfram script needs to know to set this. And then we need some code that if we're connected to a front end and we're in a safe notebook, then it's equal to.
Right. So listen, why don't we commission you, Itai, to go track down the details of this and see what needs to happen for the cloud.
Right. And then
my suggestion is to use the persistent value mechanism, but to treat it like another piece of user metadata. However, it will be nice to have some use cases where we care about this in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on.
And when there's nothing applicable, so you're in an unsaved notebook, then this should be the symbol none, or?
I think so. Is that consistent with what we're doing for these other things? I mean, I don't know what that is there. Let's see what that one is there. I have a bad feeling it's a null string. Ugh, that's weird. That's crazy.
It's not. I mean, it's not crazy if you're thinking about it from, you know, you have a uniform of data types, right?
Yeah, I understand, but I think that should instead be $input file. If there isn't one, should be none, not a null string. But again, can you check for consistency for other things like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And that behavior is documented.
For $input file name, yes.
Yes.
Weird. Does it offer any insight into why? Boy. Wow, that's even a fairly recent vintage, 2010. I'm surprised we did it that way. Well,
I think maybe this was a rename.
Oh, yeah, from $input. This is the behavior of $input. That's a little bit more ancient, 1991.
Yes.
I don't know why the spacing is wrong there between the is and the double quote, but that's a different issue. All right, let's move on. Updates to iconize. So in other words, I would prefer none, but we should investigate whether that's feasible.
Okay.
Okay, updates to iconize. So what are we saying here?
So I think the updates are only in the prototype build. So it's this
Let me get a prototype build.
And my changes haven't gone through graphic design yet, but Billy is here.
Okay. Does anybody know why we're having trouble with the prototype builds with the sign-in?
I wasn't aware that we were.
I've seen this problem for like a week or so.
Okay.
Okay, so I do this. And in an iconized blob, what's that?
Yeah, there you go.
Uniconize as opposed to de-iconize. Oh, that's cool. All right, so what do I do here? So if I do that and I say iconize, that's cool. Okay, now if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and I select that and I press Control Shift I, doesn't work. But you're saying that will be.
So in the edit menu in the main edit menu, do you have an entry for it? You don't. Why don't you?
Well, maybe I don't have a recent enough build.
Okay.
Although I do have yesterday's build.
That's yesterday's. I will investigate that.
Yeah,
Oh, it's probably because I added it to does Wolfram Desktop has its own menu setup file? That's probably what it is. I'll look into it.
Yeah, so it probably works. It works for me in Mathematica.
Okay.
So.
I can try that if you want. This looks quite magnificent. I mean, what are we looking to comment on here? It looks good to me.
Okay.
So are you happy with the uniconized being only exposed when you open up the thing, when you expand to get the information? Are you at all happy with the graphic design?
Let's look at that. Okay, so first of all, here, the hope is that in there we have, oh, good. That, the up arrow is Control, Shift I. That's kind of magnificent, yeah, okay.
Right, and you can use the same shortcut to uniconize it without opening it up. So if you select that and Shift Control I, then it should.
It's really quite nice. This is really quite nice. I guess my only issue with this iconization thing is I'm not totally convinced about this pre-icon here. And I'm, now, uniconize. I mean, the graphic design is not horrible. I don't know what I mean, the fact that there's some kind of arrowy thing there is not terrible. I don't know if Billy has a comment about how to make it better, but we got 3 icons running around here. We got that pre-icon, we got the plus thing, we got this guy.
I know we talked about removing the top left icon and swapping it out with the plus minus and possibly doing a new plus minus, but that was a long time ago and maybe opinions have changed.
In a perfect world, I wouldn't have the thing say list there. I mean, in a perfect world, I would have something which is more like a, brace ... in the actual text rather than the icon form. And I don't think this icon as such does us a lot of good. I know we've got a diversity. How many? We have like 5 different icons there, right?
I think it's more like 9, but
It's in
I
that
mean, to
neighborhood,
me,
yeah.
the more useful thing to see would be this is a list, ... right? Or this is an, F of ... whatever it is, right? And then to see some nice, elegant plus. But again, I don't think the plus. Yeah, and then the question is whether that should go there. I wonder whether on hover. Why don't we prompt for the keyboard shortcut on hover as well? See, on hover here, we could, even if we're closed, right, we could prompt for that shortcut. Get what I'm saying?
The shortcut that only works when the thing is selected. You want to advertise it in a tooltip?
Neil, you're saying that's crazy.
No, I'm trying to make sure I understand your suggestion. I think it's
That
well,
is what I'm suggesting.
I will say that's crazy.
I don't think it's crazy, but it will potentially confuse people.
Yes.
Well, okay.
Right. And of course, Iconize has the 2-argument form where you give it a name.
a label. Yeah.
Yes.
Fine. I think the iconography is too busy, too fussy. Yeah. So, I think we should try to go towards having a single icon and also having that plus not be the weird gray thing on top of the blue, but something which more blends with the blue, because I just don't think it's that important a plus to be giving, except for the uniconized. And if it was possible to give a, even in this closed form, to give something that is some kind of arrowy thing like this that you could click even in closed form to uniconize. And if the hover thing gave you some information about, click that to uniconize. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I must say I would prefer to use the word expand to the word uniconize. By the way, we got a bunch of buzzing on the phone, which would be really great to not have.
So the menu items do follow the un/comment metaphor.
Yeah, I know, which I don't think is bad for the menu item, because it's pretty clear what you mean when you see un/iconize.
Okay.
But I think in this case, what I'd like to see, and Billy, this would be for you, is a less fussy version of this, where we're emphasizing, instead of giving lists, which I think is obscure, giving something which is more like a textual, brace ... type thing. That makes sense to people? Can we see the list, please, of what the actual current icons are, the so-called 9 icons?
Yeah, give me a minute, please.
Probably if you go to the rough page, most of them must show up in examples, but right. I guess I'm not entirely clear on what your suggestion is, and also how it interacts with when you give it a label.
I'm not sure about that either, with the label part of it. Okay, so look, I've got several comments. First of all, I think the gray plus on the blue background is pretty ugly. Okay, that's my first point. My second point is it would be nice to have a one-step de-iconize, uniconize at the top level here. Third, I don't think this initial icon is adding anything. Fourth, I don't like seeing list there. I think that's obscure. I would much prefer to see something which is kind of the way a human might say. It's a brace thing with a bunch of stuff inside, which is kind of what that icon says too.
Right. So you're saying, basically you're saying for a small list of things, we have a special, right, we have brace, ellipsis, brace, and whatever are the 4 other things, and anything else, it's head, open bracket, args.
I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, look, I think that if we could get something in here that has a brace and indicates with a little superscript 10 here or some such other thing, if it can be made obvious that it's 10 items, that would be great. That gives you the maximum information and sort of as an indication of what it is. But again, it will be useful to see what the complete list of those icons is.
What if it's...
I did just email
Okay.
the list of the current icons as well as some alternates for the plus.
See, I think, okay, so we're really wanting 2 different actions there. We're wanting the plus to see more detail about the icon form, if indeed we care about that more detail. Is that all the detail we have, the head, the length, the byte count?
Pretty much. Maybe
that should just be a mouse over. Maybe it should just give that in the mouse over and not have an expander.
That would mean there's no way to copy that, but maybe that's okay.
Copy what?
Copy the content of that 184 in the byte count.
I think we could live
in
with
the
that.
tooltip, then you don't have that. Yeah.
Yeah. Though I can't say I've ever really wanted to copy out those things. I think, unlike in a summary box where I actually, for actual proper summary boxes where I have wanted to copy out specific pieces of information, I don't think I've ever particularly wanted these pieces of information.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. So, okay, so listen, what I propose is we try to simplify this. We've got 2 items, like with a string here. I don't see why we shouldn't just have something which is basically a string ... string. It's kind of unlovely that doesn't correctly smart quote itself, but that is a different issue. Yeah, I just think these things are unnecessarily cutesy. I don't know what we do with data set here.
Right. So right now with arrays, right, we give, rather than the length, we give the dimensions.
Yes, I understand. I mean, it would be magnificent if we were able to give, look, I just think maybe we should just have these icons, but have them, instead of the word, array, string, association, etc., data set, we should make these richer icons which can contain things that say things like, brace 3 by 56 or whatever. Something which can have a nice textual form there and gives the information. And what is this? Are you proposing, wait a minute, what are you showing there?
I'm showing an in situ example of each.
Okay, is that all of them?
Yes.
Okay. So I just don't believe in this give the head thing. I think it's ugly and I think it's hard for people to understand. I think we should try and custom make a typeset form for each of them. Like a string, we understand what it is. I mean, if we were able to write blah, blah, blah characters above it, great. That would be magnificent. Get what I'm saying?
Sorry, I missed it.
I said we should write such and such a number of characters on top there. I don't think I can necessarily mock it up here very easily. I mean, here, something like this, and then here, we would put, let's see if I can make this work.
Control 7, maybe?
Yeah, that's what I was going to try. Is that sensible? I don't think that's obviously stupid. Something like that.
Seems
And
very
then-
complex.
Well,
And the word characters is long.
okay, it looks complex, but would it be enough to just say 2, 3, 4, 5?
Surrounded by, you know,
What is that background noise? Could we please, set things up so we don't have that? What does it do in the case of a too big input, too big output, for example? That has a pattern there, right? So if I say something like
that
this,
uses a variant of short and uses a custom skeleton display that looks like this.
see, that's nice, what that's doing. I mean, in other words, if what we could get was something which is just that, you get what I'm saying?
Right, with quotes or braces or F of.
Yes, it
Yes,
would be very
bracket,
clear what
bracket.
that was. I like that idea, to do that. Okay, use the same form. I also wonder whether we should make the blue of the icon eyes somehow agree with the blue of the too big output. Making sense? Billy, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, we could match that.
Well, let's try it. I'm not sure if it makes sense. We might want to change this one as well. But they seem like the same kind of thing. Let's try to match that lozenge thing. Let's try to, if we have an array, I think we should do a ... I think we can do a brace humph. How to do that? Anybody got an idea? If we have a 3 by 7, 30 by 70 array, I think if we just did that, honestly, we could just have the lozenge without the braces and say 30 by 70, and people would know what it was. Am I making sense?
I think so, and that would work for data set also.
Probably. For an image, what do we want to do there?
An
I mean-
image goes to the fall through case currently. An image gets no special consideration currently. And neither does graphics or graphics.
Okay, so it just says image then.
Correct.
Right, because I mean, how often do you actually want to convert an image to iconize?
Yeah, because you can just make the image small.
Right.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, I think we've got a path here. So then the plus goes away. It's just to hover. And what is it there instead of the plus is a expand me button. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we need to talk to the cloud folk about this too. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, onward. That's very good. All right, should we go on?
Yep. Right.
What is
So,
this?
all right. So this was a discussion that's started with the bug report, and then L kernel, and then Lou,
Is
and
that this giant thread that I haven't read?
I don't think it's a giant thread, no, but it was a thread with some back and forth between me and Tali, and I guess Danny made a couple of comments.
Okay, all right. So what's the idea here?
So the idea is so there are a couple of problems. One of which is that basically that short and shallow can be quite slow in the front end, and the other being that
Okay.
right, and
So
the other.
That is so freaking ugly. I mean, the fact that we still have it looking like this after all these years, that was what it was 30 years ago. Why haven't we replaced that with that lozenge form that's used in the too big thing? Lou, that will be a question for you.
I believe we can. The reason we haven't, I can't answer.
Okay, can we investigate doing that, please? Okay, but that's separate from what you're proposing here. What are you proposing here?
Right. So the idea is, so unlike right, unlike the output size limiter, where you might want to know the actual results of the computation, so that you're willing to wait some for it to format, even if the output size limiter can be slow in certain situations. Give me
a use case here. Give me a case where you generate this. So there's a thing where we say something like log.
No, try for example transpose of range 10 to 7. And with
I'm not going to do 10 to 7. I'm going to do 10 to the 5.
But that's too fast. Put a semicolon at the end and see what happens with the 7. So the question is that it is the message that it's taking a long time. If you quiet that, now quiet it. Do the same thing with quiet and the semicolon. Super fast. So the question is, why is the message so slow?
Why is this a design problem? It just sounds like a bug.
Well, yes and no. There's it's a bug that's potentially quite difficult to fix. But also the question is,
well, I mean, the issue there is that we're feeding it to a formatter that is genuinely and diligently trying to format it, even if it's going to be very complicated to do it. And arguably, if it knows the byte count is huge, it shouldn't even bother.
Right, and sort of the point is that the things that appear in messages are generally things that you typed in, so you don't necessarily need, to see the details. Right.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. I think many cases they'd be generated. But yeah, what are you proposing here? That instead this generates some iconized form here? Right.
So if it's above, say the limit that triggers the output size limiter,
yes.
then we create some sort of iconized form which just stores it in a variable, right? We store the
store in a variable. Why doesn't it just put it here as an iconized form? And
because then you're potentially, creating these huge notebooks which aren't obvious how huge they are.
Or the user can no longer access that expression, which maybe isn't the end of the world.
I don't think it's the end of the world. If the thing is huge, I'd be perfectly happy to see, instead of this thing, some characterization. I mean, basically, short isn't doing its job very well, because I don't even know why. Because for some reason, short is slow in this case. If short was blindingly fast in this case, will we be having this discussion or not?
We might not. I mean, there's...
All right, so look, let's chase that first. Let's chase the question of whether there is a way of making short fast where it punts if it has to, just for the sake of being fast. Okay, I know that's old code. I think it was originally written by me like 31 years ago or something.
Well, the version of short that's used in the front end is completely different from the original short.
Okay. Well, Lou, can you speak to it?
Not really. No. Because it's written in C. Basically...
Okay, so somebody who knows the front-end code base has to opine on this.
No, somebody who knows the kernel C code base needs to opine on this, and that's basically me and Tom.
Okay.
Right, and so basically the way short works in a front end is it does make boxes on the whole expression, and then it shortens the boxes.
Okay, well, that's stupid. I mean,
it's not stupid if you want to avoid pinking.
Well, wait a second. This is a giant byte count. At what point do you discover the byte count?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
When you feed, in a message, right? Which, by the way, doesn't have to be the same formatter as everything else. In a message, it's being fed something. If the byte count of the thing it's fed is something modest, then all's good.
Mm-hmm.
If the byte count is huge, then you probably have to do some kind of emergency procedure.
Right. And so that is what we are suggesting.
Okay, so I'm proposing that the emergency procedure is merely a more armor-plated version of short, not a whole different mechanism. Okay, I'm just proposing that short go in with, full hazmat suit or whatever, if it knows the byte count is huge. And for example, doesn't recurse very far if it knows the byte count is huge. For example, this case, it will be fine if the thing didn't recurse into that list.
I don't know.
Okay, how about I really don't think this is for this meeting. I really don't think this is a design. So I don't think we want to invent a whole new mechanism to deal with this. I think this is basically just a robustness problem for short. And I mean, we can tackle it if you really, 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 really want me involved. We can look at some code and things, but I think we should try to avoid that.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, this is, look, the issue is you don't know how to make short right now because you haven't looked at the code. So we don't know whether it's even hard. We don't know how to make it punt in the case where
okay, let me put it this way. If it were easy to fix short, I would have done it 3 years ago when I first became aware of.
So but you looked at the code at that time and it wasn't easy to fix. Is that the basic point?
Yes.
Okay.
Can
So
I also
what I'm
point out-
suggesting, what's that?
I wanted to point out one other thing, and that is the output size limiter also depends on short. And it must be able to call short in a mode that doesn't punt. It needs to be able to show something, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you. Right, but I mean, so there's two different versions of short. One that happens in messages, one that happens in the output size limiter.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting. But how about we look at that? If we need to, let's come back to that. If there's
Okay, so all right, so then yeah, I guess that's probably easy enough to do, right? That we just have instead of calling short of shallow, which is what we currently. I mean, maybe we just want to change it entirely. Instead of calling short of shallow, which is what we currently do, we just do, or at least above a certain byte count, we just do f of args, and right, we have add of bracket ... possibly with argument.
Yeah, as beautifully as we can, but we basically punt above some byte count because it's just never going to be relevant.
Right.
Okay. By the way, is there a way in here? See, actually, there is one thing we should consider having in this stack here, which is to actually get the expressions out. You see what I'm saying?
Right. I was just going to ask Itai how impossible it would be to have short be copy pastable, and carry around the original.
Well, we don't even want that. If it's 10 million items, we do not want that.
You certainly don't want to send them to the front end.
Right.
And it's an open question, Stephen, whether you want to store them in the kernel if they're that large.
I don't think you do.
So
I don't think you care. It's a message.
But the thing you just asked for in this menu would need to go somewhere to get those values.
Well, I would be perfectly happy with Itai's actual suggestion here, which was to have some variables in the kernel that store these, the generated message things. And perhaps all that happens, and maybe this is too hacky, is for the most recently generated message, there is a variable somewhere, or the most recently generated few messages, there are variables somewhere, internal variables that store those, that store links to those message contents. This may be too much trouble. You understand what I'm suggesting? It's just so that you can extract what the actual thing was here.
Right. We're already storing the stack, and you're suggesting storing a little bit more, or possibly a lot more.
Yes, that's
values
what I'm
of-
suggesting. But I mean, the other possibility is, which would already be very useful, is to store it if it's short. See what I'm saying? Not store it above some byte count. Because
But if it's short, won't it already appear in the message?
No, there's a medium ground where, I would not infrequently set dollar, or unset dollar message preprint, so I can see what the actual content of the message was, because it's a page long or something.
yeah, I think that there is an interesting case for this. So I'd like to propose that we try to look at that. Okay, to put in the message, in that message information menu, a thing that says essentially copy. What should we call it? Copy message expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And then it basically becomes a list of the message expressions.
Okay. Yeah, I like this. I like this quite a lot. I think it, for that intermediate ground provides a way, because right, this is why I wanted the little variable,
right?
Because I was worried about the intermediate ground. Whereas if it's Tali's problem, right, where he's creating some enormous array, he's never going to want to see that, and he's the one, right? He was the original bug reporter because of being affected by this.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's move on. Precedence form.
Okay, so
this is a rapidly moldering chestnut, isn't it?
Rapidly moldering.
It's an old chestnut.
Okay,
maybe not.
Well, it's something. I think probably it's better to take a look at the source page.
Okay.
Because we're
it's a version 1 creature.
Yes, but we're updating it.
Okay. Magnificent. Okay.
And I.
Okay.
Right. So, we're adding the one argument form, which, basically says to always parenthesize, and the 3 argument form, which allows you to give it an associativity in addition to a precedence. And
is this running right now?
In the prototype build, actually, I'm not sure if it's in the prototype build. It's in my local build. I don't remember if I put it in the prototype build.
So, I mean, this is basically, if I say A plus B here, and then the precedence level is something totally grotesque, right?
Well, it's a number between 1 and 999, or possibly 1 and 1,000.
So if I were to do something where I were to say, just for the sake of, I mean, assuming we have something here, I'm going to just do something kind of grotesque, okay? I'm going to say nest list, precedence form, random integer, right? I'm just trying to test what roughly this looks like. Random integer up to 1,000, right? And then I'm going to do, so there's no associativity there, so that's probably a sign I don't have the new version, right? That's not accepting a third argument.
Well, that's because we haven't defuturized the note, right?
Okay, so if I do this, what on earth am I seeing here?
Right, so that's not going to parenthesize ever because you're in sort of singleton land, right? You're comma separated. So this would be, I mean, there are some examples some futurized and tentative examples. So right, so there's that middle tentative one is.
What's this? Postfix not repeating. What is that business?
Right. So we have operators like factorial where, so normally if you have a repeated postfix or prefix operator, you don't add parentheses.
Yes.
But we have some special ones like factorial where you do want to add parentheses because otherwise you'll confuse them with double factorial.
Right. Oh gosh, that's grotesque. Okay, but so this prec second argument, you are proposing to add a whole world of more complicated things there. Is that correct?
Well, I'm proposing to add a third argument, and then there was the right. Then there was the one argument form, which was to to basically always parenthesize.
What problem were you trying to solve here globally?
So we were trying to solve the problem of making it easy to add parentheses. So that's the one argument form. And then the three argument form was basically sort of half there. So I just sort of cleaned it up and...
Okay, and what's the relationship between that and, I mean, why is precedence form... So precedence form with one argument would just always add parens. Is that the idea?
Whenever it appears as an argument to an operator, yes.
Okay. So, and by the way, there's C notes for, we really have to fix those. I mean, that's a documentation issue, which is sort of a holdover from when the thing was a physical book that we didn't want to make too long. Okay, so what you're saying is if I say F of... Well, if I say A plus precedence form B, comma 10 or something.
Right.
Okay, then I will get that.
And if you made it 900, then you would definitely not get parentheses, even if they were potentially needed by whatever was inside of the first argument of precedence form. Okay, so right, so basically, so there are sort of, I guess I have sort of three sets of issues. One is the documentation of infix talks about 4 types of grouping, but doesn't really make that much sense. And it's really we really have 3 types of grouping, because you have,
okay, well, to be clear on what we're talking about here, I mean, precedence form is from version 1.
Right.
Infix
is also so from version 1.
And has the most pathetic set of examples.
Yes, and basically if you yes, so infix was never really fully ported over to the box world, so that 4 argument form, which is listed in the first note, doesn't work in the front end.
Oh, for goodness sake. Okay.
And
is that solvable or is that not solvable?
I suppose it's potentially solvable, but I guess my feeling is that it's perhaps better to obsolete infix, prefix, and postfix and just sort of tell people we have format and we have, 2 boxes and, precedence form.
I mean, the fact that hasn't been missed in 22 years, that 4 argument form, is kind of telling, I think. Have you looked in the bug reports? Do you know if people have looked for it?
I don't think people have looked for it. I think people have looked... So people have complained about the fact that if you do some funky, operator, then the output may not parse the same as the input.
Okay.
Which is probably a harder problem to fix.
And whatever happened to the Jason Harris notation package that people use?
It's still there. People still use it. We get bug reports about it every now and then.
I think this is a topic that needs a slightly more global view. I mean, I don't. Maybe we can add those features to precedence form. That's fine. I certainly think the one argument thing is useful. The one argument one is clearly useful. Whether the look, maybe what we can do is start building out this one with associativity being a string argument. Don't try and use symbol forms like prefix and so on there, but always just use a string argument. Let's try and build out precedence form in the way that you are essentially speccing it with these different, non-repeating, whatever it is, things, the different choices for the third argument there. And let's see how that works.
Okay.
And then we may also subsequently talk about deprecating infix, prefix, postfix.
Okay.
Although I'm not sure we need to, but we can discuss that. I mean, I don't see why we would deprecate them, actually. I think but let's get precedence form cleaned up first.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's move on. UTF-16, UTF. Is this seemed like you had it under control?
Right. So there was one point of I think disagreement between John and David. Neither of whom could make it to this meeting. But basically, the question was, what do you do about UTF-32 and UTF-16 in two-character code and from character code? So one school of thought says, basically, well, UTF-32 should basically be like Unicode, right? It just gives the number. And if you ask for the little endian version, then it still gives you numbers, but it basically byte swaps the integers, right? So if you ask for that,
yes, I understand. With is there a little endian? Is there a way of asking for it with little endian? I see. The endianness starts mattering at you. Okay, does endianness matter to UTF-16?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So basically, the question is: so if you ask for that for UTF-32 or UTF-16, the question is: would you get one 32-bit number, or would you get 4 8-bit numbers?
Sorry, for UTF-16 here.
Right. So then the question is, that did something. I wonder what that did.
Well, who knows what that did? But.
Right. So the question is, should that produce?
I strongly think that should produce a single integer.
Okay. And that was my and John's feeling as well. And
the integer should pack its bits, however, the endianness says to pack its bits.
Yep. Okay. So that's what we'll do.
Okay, fine. I mean, I think two-character code has to return an integer code.
Okay. Okay, so
this is rather magnificent, this stuff, but I mean, this is a complicated topic. I thought this was being aggregated into the meeting that we have about package manager stuff, which is in like an hour. But what is this? This is
right. So the question is, should we give Packlet a summary box, and what should that summary box be? And I think we have, other than the icon, which would probably need to be better, I think we have something, pretty reasonable.
And how would you ever see one of these?
So, for example, there's the first input there where you Packlet install or you Packlet search.
I see. And right now that Packlets thing is some kind of old style.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree. A proper summary blob would be better.
Right. So I have no, I have no objection to adding this in principle. The one thing I would point out, which I think is rather weird, is that Packlet is a non-systemic custom symbol and an undocumented one at that.
Well, I think we're supposed to be changing that.
Okay.
I mean, that was the point, and I think even that meeting we have coming up in an hour or so is about that very topic.
Okay. Well, whatever meeting that is, I was not invited to it, so I don't know about it.
I'll add you, Itai.
So
you should.
And if you're going to be discussing iconography, can you add me too?
I doubt we'll. Let's put you on call. I doubt we'll get to iconography.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's where we want to deal with that. But let's make sure this item gets into that meeting's agenda, please.
Okay.
Who's PMing that meeting? Looks like Manu is. PMing.
I don't know. I'll find that out.
It's a mix between Manu and Brad.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That looks like we got through our agenda.
Yep.
Thank you all very much. Thanks to folks on the live stream. See you all soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.